Today is Sunday, November 17th, and today I learned something about communication and kind of like the concept of communication. I was listening to a podcast, and it was a podcast with Cleo Abram. If you don't know who that is, she's basically like a tech YouTuber. She's pretty cool. Anyways, she mentioned how within her process of making videos, she wants to make sure that the origination of the idea should be as close as possible to the actual creation. So your head should be as close as possible to your hands. And she said that because when you have a vision for something and you try to communicate it, things will be lost. Because you're trying to make a link between you and the other person. So that idea of linking and communication is just something that I wanted to talk about because I found it interesting. I just feel like communication is very important, and I just kind of wanted to talk about the conceptual understanding of communication. So basically the main thing that I wanted to talk about is that communication is just a link between two things. So whether those two things are people, a digital existence, a physical existence, a mental existence, communication is just a link between those two things. So an example of this is coding. Coding or computer programming is the link between the human's brain and the computer. That's what communication is. Communication is just a link between those two things. So there are a bunch of different manipulated variables, let's say, within this little bubble of communication. So one variable are the two different communicators. So whether that's a person, a computer, something like that. Like that could be a lot of different things. And there's two of them. So those are two different manipulated variables, although they have the same type, which is a communicator, right? And then another manipulated variable is the means to which you communicate. So between humans, we have languages, right? That is a communication medium. So that is the third manipulated variable. We have the two communicators, and then we have the communication medium. And then this isn't really a manipulated variable, but it can be important if you're worried about the loss of information, but the number of chains. So basically the number of communicators. And then there's also just the information. Like, what are you trying to communicate? Are you trying to communicate some creative idea? Are you trying to communicate a visual idea? Are you trying to communicate a series of steps? There's a lot of different things that you can communicate through a lot of different mediums by which you can communicate to a bunch of different communicators to which you're going to communicate with. So those are kind of like the manipulated variables. So I made a very, very simple drawing, but this is essentially what I'm thinking of, right? These are communicators, the 1 and the 2. And then the link is the communication. Communication is just linking information from one piece of existence to another piece of existence. How is this useful, right? Well, let's analyze this. When do we communicate? Communication is literally everywhere. I was just thinking about this before I was filming this video. Communication is everywhere. There's more communication than you think. Not just between people, but just between different pieces of existence, whether that is a person or a physical object or a digital existence. There's so many different kinds of communication, because communication is just linking, right? Communication is just a link between some kind of information or package, it's carrying one thing to another. So you could think about communication is like package delivery, right? So when you order something on Amazon, it goes from Amazon, and then the package is the information, and then Amazon is one communicator and you are the other communicator. The package is the information, and then the means by which it is communicated is through physical travel, right? So communication, in the sense that communication is just a link. Communication is just carrying a package and carrying some intellectual property, or maybe even physical property, from one existence to another existence, right? So communication is just a link. Communication is a pathway. Communication is linking two things together. Because, okay, you can think about communication as like the package kind of thing, but you could also think of communication as just finding common ground and linking those two things together. So if I think about the brain, right? When we're learning is effective and good when it connects to something that we've learned previously. Right now, I'm trying to make this connection for you guys between a package delivery to this conceptual understanding of communication. So because that is something easy that you can understand, I'm trying to link that. So it's taking something that you already know and a new thing that relates to that, and you want to connect that. So communication can either be thought of as package delivery, or it can be thought of as finding common ground and just linking two ideas together. So essentially, communication is connection. Communication is something where you could draw an arrow from one communicator to the next communicator. So in terms of package delivery, you can see we have Amazon, which delivers the package to you, right? You have that arrow. And then within like a personal conversation, you have one person to the next person delivering intellectual property or just like information, and it's just going back and forth between the people, right? Like if we think about communication as connection, right? Connection meaning arrows. Those arrows could either go in like a package delivery kind of thing, like you are giving, like one communicator is giving and the other communicator is taking, right? And then if it's a conversation, then they would give something and then the other person would take, and it's just like an exchange of intellectual property or physical property, right? It's an exchange. But then there's also the communication, which I believe communication is connection of intellectual linking. Because I feel, maybe this is just me, but I feel like if I define communication as connection, as just a link, then when I draw my mind maps, all those arrows, those are communications, right? So let me give an example of this. If I have a mind map of my school subject, right, of some conceptual topic, and I'm trying to draw a mind map of it, when one piece of information connects to another piece of information and it has that arrow, that is a connection, right? Which means by my definition of communication is connection, that means that is a communication. So within that mind map, what are the different parts? Let's define what the different parts are. So what are the communicators? The communicators are the concepts. So one concept is saying one thing, and then another concept is saying another thing. So they're kind of like two different definitions, right? So then what is the means by which they communicate? How are those concepts getting linked? Basically, at least for me, with my mind maps, I find the common ground. I find the similarities. So if I say, okay, this certain response is using dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter, and then this other response is using melatonin, which is another neurotransmitter. So my link between those two would be that they're both neurotransmitters. And I can link those two to the main, or maybe not even the main concept, but to a central concept of neurotransmitters. And I can apply all the information I know about neurotransmitters to both the melatonin and the dopamine. In terms of intellectual thinking, if I think about communication as connection, then making those mind maps, making those connections is communication. And also, it's like communicationception, because that connection is communicating something to my brain, and my brain is making that connection. Okay, so now that we have gotten down like kind of what is communication, what does this process look like? How I talked about earlier about how there can be multiple communicators, right? It can go from one person to the next person to the next person. They're all just messengers. They're all just middlemen, right? So why is it that the more people you have in the middle, the more loss of communication there is? I mean, we all know this happens because like we've all played the game telephone, right? You whisper something and then they say it to the next person, they say it to the next person. It's completely different, right? By the time you get all the way around this big group of people or whatever, right? So why is it that we're losing this information? I like to think of it, it's kind of like energy, right? energy is never created or destroyed, it is always transferred. But within a lot of those transferring mechanisms, there is a little bit of loss. Now, we're not losing energy, but in a lot of different mechanisms, when energy is used, the biggest kind of loss of energy is heat. Heat is lost in a lot of different actions, right? Heat is lost. Or not necessarily lost, because energy is not lost, but in the sense of like we're losing that energy, like there's an energy leak. Heat is a very big part of that. So in the same way, just like heat is lost in energy transfer, information is lost in communication transfer. So how can we use this information? I've kind of just been yapping about my thoughts about how communication works, and I do find this very interesting. So how can we use this information, right? Well, when are we communicating, right? Let's go back to, like, I was literally talking about this earlier. When are we communicating? We're communicating every single day in almost every moment of our life. I'm communicating to you right now. My microphone is communicating to my computer right now. My computer, one part of my computer is communicating to another part of my computer right now. So there is a lot of different communication happening in this very moment, and probably more than you realize throughout your day, right? So if there's so much communication happening, when we need to identify when are those moments where we want to take advantage of that communication, mostly in human to human communication, but also in like human to digital communication and digital to digital communication. We want to make the most of that, right? Because the goal is to be efficient, and to make, in terms of communication, we want to lose as little information as possible. And we want to make it as efficient as possible, right? So we want to just have two communicators, and we want to have as little loss of information throughout that communication. Okay, so the obvious one for me right now on how we can use this information is when we're learning something, right? I mentioned this earlier. When you're learning something, make the connection, communicate, and make sure that information is getting communicated to you effectively. Make that link between what you do know already and what you are trying to learn. So when you're learning, you have to make those connections, because that will ultimately make the information gathering, that'll make your bubble of information a lot bigger than just if you were just tried to memorize it or something like that. Connect it to what you already know. So in terms of learning, connections are super important. Like your brain, that is what your brain is made up of. Your brain is made up of connections. It's just one synapse to the next synapse to the next neuron to the next neuron through these synapses, right? Your brain is just made up of connections. So if you want your brain to know more, if you want your brain to be bigger, then you need more connections, right? So make more connections. So in terms of learning, make more connections between what you know and what you are trying to know. In terms of people, I think a big part of being a good communicator, because good communication is getting information from me to you, right? In an effective and efficient way. So how can we be effective and efficient? We need to lead them to this link or to this conclusion, to this link, because that's ultimately, communication is a connection is a link, so we need to lead them through this link. So when I'm trying to communicate about communication to you guys, I'm trying to lead you through this link, through this connection that I have made about communication. I'm trying to lead you through that and be an effective communicator through that. And the way we do that is through, like I said, connecting what we already know to what we don't know. So in this podcast that I was listening to, they were talking about how they don't use acronyms. She doesn't use excessive jargon, because not everyone is going to know what that means. So you need to connect what you already know and slowly expand on it and slowly build that connection, slowly build that link to be an effective communicator. So you have to start simple, make those connections. Okay, when you're communicating something, start small, right? Start with what you know, what both sides know, and slowly build the connection to a new thing, and then build on top of that, and then build the connection to a new thing, and build on top of that, and then to a new thing and a new thing. That is how you can teach someone something, honestly. Like, I would say I'm kind of teaching you guys this thing. I'm explaining to you guys something I learned about communication. And I started with something I started with package delivery, and I started with, okay, what do we know about communication? We know that there are communicators. We know that there's intellectual property. I started with what we knew, and I slowly built upon it to have this broader view of this concept of communication. So ultimately, I guess if you had to take away one thing from this video, it would just be to be mindful of communication and understand that communication is connection. Communication is a link. So when you're trying to learn something, when you're trying to teach something, or maybe you're just trying to understand something about, I feel like the digital communication is so important, right? How my mic is connecting to my computer, how my computer connects to my headphones, that kind of thing, how my electricity is connecting to my computer, right? Understanding that is all just communication, and just understanding how communication works helps us have a better understanding of how our world works, and helps us have a better understanding of how we can live in this world through the learning and through the teaching and through the conversations and through the explanations. So understand communication. If you've watched this video, then now you understand communication, at least how I view it, how I learned it today. That communication is just a connection. Communication is a link. And we need to build upon what we know to the new thing we're trying to know. And that accounts for learning something, that accounts for having a conversation with someone, that accounts for the digital communication within this world, that accounts for so much. That is what I learned today. If you found this video interesting, then definitely hit the like button. If you have any thoughts about all this communication stuff, then definitely leave a comment down below, because I was kind of just yapping. But if you found it interesting, and if you have any thoughts, then definitely leave a comment down below. If you want to see more videos like these, then definitely subscribe, because I'm posting every single day talking about what I learned that day and how I'm trying to apply it to my life and how you guys can apply it to yours. So if you want to see videos just like this one, daily insights, posting every night, at least my time every night, then definitely subscribe. I'm trying to get 1,000 subscribers before 2025. I am currently looking at my live subscriber account. It is 995, so I only need 5 more subscribers to hit 1,000, which is very, very exciting. So if you are not subscribed yet, then please subscribe. This video is specifically recommended for you, so if it piques your interest, then definitely click on it. You can subscribe in that corner. And if you subscribe, then I will see you in tomorrow's video. Bye!